Hello everybody, Ben Coley here, and it's March 30th, and we're doing a second half today of another show. I wanted to go back and just review some of the things that we were talking about because we got about 20 hours of video shot already, and I wanted to just make sure that we sort of have a little bit of a review about what we need to do to get our country back on track. And I'd like to help lead the charge to get our country back. And we're going to do it legally. We're going to do it without any kind of injuries or harm or war or civil war or any kind of fighting. We're going to beat our country back out of the hands of these oligarchs and kooks that are running it right now, fair and square at the ballot box. And that's how we're going to get our country back, and it's going to be easy to do. Just a few things we have to remember. Number one, we will not vote for anybody who's in power right now. No congressman, no senator, no president, no friend of same or family member or anybody affiliated with or connected with or who has a business relationship with any of the above. We need to make sure that they're all gone. And even if we take out some of the good ones with the bad, oh well. And the only people that we're going to put in are going to be the oath keepers. They have to be an oath keeper. You know what an oath keeper is? An oath keeper is a person who has sworn to uphold the Constitution. The original Constitution in its full glory. I'm talking about right to own a gun and bear arms. I'm talking about the freedom of speech, privacy, the whole thing, the whole ball of wax. And that's the only way we're going to get our country back. Our founding fathers right now would be rolling over in their grave if they could see what we're doing. You know, I just heard last night in the news that our Department of Homeland Security and FEMA is rolling out in other countries. God forbid, can you imagine? I mean, I was down in Louisiana. I'm an insurance adjuster, and I had to go down to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. I didn't get there until well after it was over with. But I did see the damage that was done, and I saw what was done, and I spoke to a lot of people down there. And that whole thing was so mishandled, it's ridiculous. Now, for us to go to Mexico or South America or other countries around the world and say, hey, how would you like to join up to be a member of FEMA? And we'll protect you. No, the answer should be no. How about you want to become a member of the Department of Homeland Security and we're going to protect you under our DHS umbrella from the United States? The answer is no, you stay away from us. My advice to other countries, do not let our FEMA worm their way into your lives, into your country. Do not let our Department of Homeland Security worm their way into your lives. It will just mess things up for you. And they will not be there to help you when the crap hits the fan. But they will be there to cause you problems before the crap hits the fan. Or you'll never see them at all ever, and they'll just be like a threat over you all the time, listening to your phone conversations and saying that they're helping you. Every once in a while they'll come down to arrest somebody who you probably like. Don't do it. Matter of fact, we're going to get rid of these Department of Homeland Security and FEMA. We never had them before, and we don't need them now, and it's just an expense that we cannot bear. Goodbye FEMA, goodbye Department of Homeland Security. We have the police, and we have the good old local people to take care of themselves, and with the money in their pocket, just like Governor Rick Scott says, less taxes, keep the money in your pocket because you're going to know how to spend it best. The best thing that you can do to stay safe in an emergency is to know your neighbors and have friends locally and have pacts with them, friendship agreements, and plans for contingencies and emergencies, and take care of yourselves. Because I'm telling you, just like when the hurricanes hit in Florida, dude, they are not coming. You're not going to see them for a while, and when they do come, you know what they're going to say? We'll give you a loan. And we're going to take a lien against your house. If you don't pay us back, we're going to foreclose on your house. That's what they're going to say. Well, you don't need a loan, you need help. You might not have a job as a result of a hurricane because your business might have blown away. Your job site might not even be there. The building might be gone. So if they give you a loan, you can't be sure you can pay the loan back, and then you're going to end up losing your house because FEMA is going to foreclose on you. These guys are no good, folks, and they're waving around those guns that shoot those nasty bullets that they want to buy up and take away from you. They want to disarm you so they can have the guns. And the first thing they're going to do is point the gun right at the center of your chest or right at your head when something happens, like you're the bad guy. That's what they're going to do. Just like the police do now, the militarized police. They're going to point a machine gun straight at you. Now, how's that going to help you? If you're lucky, they'll throw you a bottle of water. But I'm sure if you're smart and you're a homeowner, you already have a bottle of water saved and put away. Many of them. So, folks, believe me, you don't need the DHS. And some people might say, well, what if ISIS attacks? If ISIS attacks, we have the National Guard. We have the cops, the police. You have the state police backing them up. You have the sheriff's department. And you have the people. Because they're all going to be armed, because they're all going to have a right to have their rifle. And just like the Swiss people, they keep their assault rifles in their houses. Fully automatic rifles. They keep them at their house. They're required to keep it at their house. Nobody's going to mess with them. Nobody's going to mess with us. Can you imagine how long ISIS would last, even if we didn't have DHS and FEMA, because they're not going to do anything anyway, just with a well-armed populace. If the government would give back our right to own a gun, and well, we have a right to own a gun, but make it easier once again to buy a gun because the prices are too high now because they're cracking down on gun sellers and you can't buy bullets anywhere. But let's say you roll things back 20 years and ISIS shows up in your neighborhood. How long do you think they would last against well-armed homeowners and the local police who know the territory and the local state police and the National Guard in case he needed some bigger weapons? They wouldn't last but 30 seconds. Folks, you don't need the DHS and you don't need FEMA. I was here as an insurance adjuster on the ground. They did nothing but cause more trouble than they fixed. Not to mention the fact they took people's guns away and they encouraged the police to kill people. They blocked off New Orleans so that the people who wanted to leave couldn't leave. If you tried to leave, to run away, because you were going to drown to death, they would shoot you. So instead of drowning to death, you'd get shot. Folks, these guys are nothing but trouble. Plus, they're helping to militarize the police, which I'm totally against that. The police have enough guns. And the people, as long as the people have a right to arm themselves, they'll stay armed. They can protect themselves. And the best thing about having a well-armed populace is they know who's supposed to be on their street and in their neighborhood and in their neighbor's house. They know better who's supposed to be living next door than the police do. So you think about that. So we are going to, let's review. We are not going to vote for anybody who's in power right now. Brothers or sisters or friends or relatives are the same. That means no Hillary Clinton. None of the people that you know running for Congress, trying to run for president. No. No. Don't let them advance to be the president. I heard last night that the Congress voted in a bill that says we're not going to make any law against chemtrails and we don't care what's coming out of the back of the airplane. Now I could see as a matter of pollution control, maybe they don't care if the plane's smoky a little bit because they don't want to get involved with putting airlines out of business because the engine might be a little old and maybe it's an older style and it burns more gas, burns more fuel and smokes a little bit. I could see that. But they're spraying toxic materials right on our head, if I'm right, and a lot of people think that they are. Top scientists measured chemicals coming out of the back of those airplanes that are highly toxic. It needs to be investigated. It's worthy of an investigation. I'm going to investigate. If I'm in charge, I'm going to investigate. I'm going to make sure that every airplane does not have some kind of ability to spray poison. No, this is a recipe for genocide. Having the airplane fly over, what, they're going to pump bug spray on us? How about human genocide spray? You know, they have spray like that. It's called nerve gas. They just spray nerve gas out the back of the airplane and kill everybody. How about that? And our Congress just voted to let them spray whatever they want out of the back of the airplane. So any madman can open up an airline company and rig up spray nozzles on a fumigation plane and gas out a whole community and kill everybody. I suppose after everybody's dead, maybe they'll track down what happened and maybe they'll arrest the guy. But he'll say, well, it was legal for me to spray whatever I sprayed. He'll say, no, that's murder. But I mean, think about that. For the Congress not to care that an airliner is rigged to spray something, whatever, out the back end. They just don't care about you, folks. They are alcoholics too, by the way. Most of them are alcoholics. They go to Washington, they go to these parties, and they drink until they're plastered. They don't read the bills before they sign them. Nancy Pelosi, her famous line, let's sign the bill so that we can read it. Are you kidding me? Let's sign the bill before we can read it? So help me God, we're going to have a mandatory jail term for constitutional violators who work for the government. Not for the ordinary guy. For the ordinary guy, yeah, you're going to have some kind of a de minimis mandatory problem with the law. If you are listening in on your neighbor's phone, yeah, you're going to go to jail. But it isn't going to be anything compared to if you're working for the government, or you're a police officer, or you're a congressman and a senator, and you violate the Constitution, or even any one person's constitutional rights, or everyone you represent's constitutional rights. You will have mandatory jail term. Just like they have mandatory drug sentencing, you're going to have mandatory Constitution violation sentencing. Okay, then the next thing we talked about is legalization of drugs. All drugs are going to be legal. We're not going to call it drugs, because what you put into your body is none of the government's business. Just like it's none of the government's business what an airliner sprays out the back of the nozzle to them. I think it is, because I mean they're spraying it on top of the people, and the people have no way of knowing. But when the person himself puts something into his body, it's not the government's job to say, hey, what is it? We have to spy on you to figure out what you put into your body, and where did you get it, and is it legal, and why are you taking it, and we have to put you in jail because of it. No, if you put something in your body, I mean, I would think, and you're an adult, then you know what you put into your body, and it's like, I guess in that case it would be like telling the airliner, spray me with Raid, spray me with nerve gas. Okay, here it comes. Well, in that case, but now, when it comes to drugs, folks, you're talking about doing something to yourself. You're harming yourself. But if you talk to people who take drugs, they're going to say they take drugs to be happy, to feel better, to enjoy life, to be out of pain, to maybe forget something that they want to forget. They have reasons for taking drugs or medications. And real doctors have real reasons for prescribing medication that aren't just to cure an illness, but to make people mentally happier. It's a pursuit of happiness. Many drugs today that are prescribed are antidepressant pills, which is what? It's a pill to make you not depressed, therefore to make you happy. Legal. Doctor prescribes it. Oh, why shouldn't you be able to smoke pot? And by the way, I don't like pot. I voted for it, though, in the referendum. And my wife, we voted for it because it's the principle of the thing. You know, just because we don't like it, we're not going to stop people that want to smoke it from smoking it, because they all smoke it because they want to be happy. It looks to me like they're pretty damn happy when they smoke it. I don't know, maybe I ought to try it again. Last time I tried it was 40 years ago, and I didn't like it. And I don't want to smoke anyway because smoking is bad for your lungs. But if I liked it, I wouldn't want anybody to stop me from smoking it. I wouldn't think that the government's job should be to spy on me on the telephone, thereby violating my constitutional right to privacy, to see what I am doing, what I am up to, who am I buying it from, what am I taking, when am I taking it, when is the deal going down. You know, then we got to pay this schmuck to listen to our phone conversations. So they're violating your Constitution while they're listening to you on the telephone to find out when you're going to smoke your joint. I mean, the whole thing is just ridiculous, and we're actually at this point having to pay taxes to the people who are breaking the Constitution, namely following us around, stalking us, listening to our phone conversations, telling us what drugs to put into our body. I think our doctor can tell us what drugs to put into our body, or we can make up our own mind as adults what to put into our body, even if it kills us. I mean, look, the government doesn't care about Fukushima. That's definitely going to kill you. You could talk to any physicist and they'll tell you, you're going to die from Fukushima. And they haven't lifted a finger, they haven't even told you. I think maybe if you take drugs, you know, whoever sells it to you should probably tell you it's not good for you. And maybe that's about it. I don't think there should be any law, though, otherwise then they're going to say, you follow the law, you didn't follow the law. I mean, it's none of their damn business. And we shouldn't have to pay anybody to try to find these things out, because then they're going to be listening to you and following you around, which is violating your right to privacy. Coming into your house and looking around. Mandatory jail, 10 years. You police officers, search somebody's car, search somebody's house, RV, boat, airplane, anything. You're going down for 10 years, mandatory. Because that's breaching somebody's privacy is serious. Unless you have a warrant signed by a judge, and it better be a judge that has investigated why he signed it. And you get judges that are signing too many of these warrants, the judge is going to go to jail because he's not reading them well enough. Because if he starts signing warrants without reading them and understanding the whole story, then he's violating his right to represent properly. And he's violating your constitutional right to privacy. Somebody who's just rubber stamping these things that the police put up or whatever. Now let's talk about the police for a minute. You know, we hear another story about a police shooting again the other night. Look, folks, if I'm the leader, police are only going to be able to return fire. That's all. If you're a police officer, you get paid to take the first shot. You better be able to duck. That's why they teach you to duck, hide, and cover, and why they give you body armor. And my advice is don't SWAT team anybody, and you won't get shot. You're probably going to get shot if you SWAT team somebody and you really piss them off and you scare them. My advice would be, you know, have the newspaper boy serve the warrant. Knock on the door. Hey, I work for the newspaper, just like I did when I was a kid. Open up. We have a search warrant. We're going to come in whether you like it or not. So don't just bash the door down and come in. Guy might think you're he might think that you're thieves or something. He doesn't know who you are. And in the night, all he hears is his door being knocked down. If he has a gun, he has a right to shoot you, and he's going to shoot you. Many times the police don't identify themselves, or the poor guy in the house or woman in the house is so scared. All they remember hearing is the door getting knocked down in the middle of the night, and how terrified they were the week before when their house got broken into. So they might pull a gun out, and then the police are going to shoot them. No, it's a recipe for disaster, and you know it, and that's why I'm not going to let you do it. No SWAT teams, unless it's the only time you're going to SWAT team somebody is in a kidnapping case or something where you got some nutball in there and he's got a bomb or a gun or something and he's waving it around and he's going to start shooting hostages. Yeah, then you could SWAT team the guy. But you're not going to go SWAT team somebody over some pot or some drugs or something like that. First of all, the drugs are going to be legal, so that's going to be out of the ball game. Or SWAT team him because you think he has an illegal gun or something. No, you go in his house when the guy's at work. Then you get a search warrant, you go knock on his door, get him to open the door, and you go in. My advice is to send some non-threatening newspaper boy or a pizza delivery guy to knock on the door. Doesn't even have a gun. He just says, I'm here with this, and I'm really sorry, but I got to serve a search warrant because the police think you got an illegal gun or something. You're a convicted felon, you're not supposed to have a gun. Something like that. And the right to own a gun, that will be right up there. I mean, you've got a right to not only own a gun, but to bear it. And this whole baloney that we want to sign some kind of a UN treaty that supersedes all laws and suddenly makes owning a gun illegal because there's a UN treaty. Now that UN treaty of small arms is supposed to jump ahead of our Constitution, rights that we were born with. I mean, we were born before you signed that treaty. So we're grandfathered in, you see. And you're not going to be able to sign any kind of a treaty with the UN that's going to knock our constitutional rights out. You just have to say, I'm sorry, I'd like to sign your UN treaty if that's what you want to do. But it isn't going to knock any of our basic civil rights out. No. You can sign a treaty to do whatever. Now let's talk about sovereignty and people to have the right to self-determination. Talk about the UN for a minute. The people in the Ukraine, as you know, on the eastern side of Ukraine, they said they didn't want to have any part of being Ukrainian and they wanted to go back to the Soviet Union, which is Russia now. They had decades to decide if they wanted to stay independent Ukraine or whatever, but they had enough of the Ukraine. The economy is going nowhere. The only thing that the EU can offer them is debt, and they have no ability to pay the debt. There's no planning. There's nothing that's going to help you. But working with Russia, they can become part of in their own minds, they feel they can become part of a bigger system that's going to offer them some opportunity. So they have a right to decide to take a chance to sign back up with Russia. That doesn't mean that we have a right to go halfway around the earth and supply non-lethal weapons. By the way, I saw the non-lethal weapons being unloaded the other day off of the Air Force transport plane. They were fully up-armored Humvees with machine gun turrets, the good kind, they have the windows up in the front that are bulletproof, so the machine gun is totally encased in bulletproof glass. All they had to do was put the machine gun in there. So that's non-lethal aid. Well, as soon as they put the machine gun up there, it's lethal aid. I mean, that's almost like saying, well, I'm going to deliver you an Abrams and A1 battle tank. I'm just not going to give you the bullets for it, the shells for it. But by the way, after you take delivery of the Abrams tank, call Belgium up and they'll sell you the shells. I mean, it's ridiculous. You're helping Chocolate Man. I call him Chocolate Man, Poroshenko. And there's people there who don't want to fight their brothers and sisters and relatives on the other side of the country. That's crazy. That's like, I mean, I've got my family and friends are up in New Jersey, but I moved to Florida because I like the water so much. But I decided I wanted to live the second half of my life in Florida. Whereas my friends, they didn't want to move. They want to live the second half of their life up there. Well, I had the right to self-determination, so I moved. They have the right to stay. Actually, I was hampered in my ability to move, believe it or not, which I told you the story in one of my earlier shows regarding Obamacare, how that started. It started as an offshoot of the JUA, the Joint Underwriting Association. The idea and the theory of it came from the Joint Underwriting Association, which insured automobiles back in the 70s and the 80s in New Jersey, which I was a part of. I was an agent too. That thing sank so far in debt that that after I moved to Florida, I had to pay car insurance to New Jersey for 3 years, even though my new car, as soon as I came to Florida, I bought a new car, a new used car, 2 of them, and they were Florida licensed, Florida registered. I had a Florida driver's license. My New Jersey one I had to turn into the Florida Bureau, and they sliced it in half with a big pair of scissors, I told you. And several months later, I got a letter from the state of Florida that said your driver's license is canceled. Well, go back and you listen to my other show. Bottom line is I had to pay 3 years worth of insurance premiums for car insurance in New Jersey, even though I had nothing to do with New Jersey anymore. Because you weren't allowed to move. If you were a resident in New Jersey and you moved, and at any time you had the JUA insurance, you had to pay for 3 years after you moved out if you didn't like it. You couldn't just move away from it. You could move, but you still had to pay for 3 years. So I had to pay for insurance here, and I had to pay for insurance up there. Otherwise, they'd cancel your license up there, which you didn't have in your possession anymore, but because of reciprocity, they would terminate your Florida license. So I had to pay it. I mean, there's no way out of it. I think it was illegal. In fact, I know it's illegal, but hiring a lawyer to fight it is just too hard. It's just easier to pay it. And believe me, I didn't have the money then to pay it. It wasn't easy, but hey, that damaged the economy of Florida, because if I didn't have to pay that New Jersey car insurance for the 3 years that I lived in Florida, that would have been extra money for me to go out to dinner, to buy a better car, to buy better insurance in Florida versus having to pay insurance in New Jersey and in Florida. It would have been better for the Florida economy. Now, let's take it a step further. Suppose the state of Florida says, look, Washington is going off the deep end. You're crazy. We don't want any party anymore. And we have a referendum in Florida, and the people of Florida say, we've had it. We don't want to be part of the United States anymore. We don't want to pay the IRS. We don't want to pay taxes. We don't want Social Security either. We don't want any benefits, but we don't want to pay anything either. We want to be left alone. Well, states have the right to, I believe states have the right to break away if everybody votes and they want to break away, and most people say they want to break away. I wouldn't want to see Washington saying, well, we're going to send the army down there to straighten you Floridans out, or you Texans out. We're going to straighten you guys out. You're obligated. You have to stay part of something that you don't like. Well, that's what's happening in the Ukraine. Chocolate Man, who lives in the western side of town, western side of the state, is saying to the eastern side, you can't secede. And they're like, well, we don't even speak the same language. And all you're doing is taxing us, and all the factories are over here, and you guys don't do anything over there except for borrow money from the EU and give it to yourselves. That's where all the oligarchs live. And the other side of town, where the Russians live, they all work. They go to work every day, work in the coal mines and factories and stuff. So they seceded. And Vladimir Putin and the Russian Duma, which is their version of the Congress, voted to allow them to become a part of Russia. No different than if Florida seceded. So what do? We surround Russia with NATO. How would we like it if Mexico, same thing, Mexico calls up the Soviet, calls up Russia, Vladimir Putin, and they say, we're sick and tired of the Americans coming down here and shooting up the place and telling us that we can't smoke pot, and giving all these high-power weapons to the police, so the police shoot at us all the time. So every time we try to snort cocaine or take some kind of drug, the police are allowed to kill us. When before the the United States got involved, we were allowed to do whatever we wanted. We were free. And by the way, the NSA, we found out you guys are tapping all our telephones. And you told our police that they could break into our houses and look around anytime they wanted, when they didn't used to do that before. So you Americans did nothing but caused us to lose our privileges and rights and privacies. And they have a vote in Mexico. And the people in Mexico vote, 98% of them vote to join Russia because they want protection, because they can't protect themselves from the United States if they try to say they want to join Russia and Russia doesn't take them in. The United States is going to invade them and say, you can't do this. They should have a right to join. Mexico should have a right to join Russia if they want. And as long as the Russian Federation takes them in as a state, how about Argentina, the Falkland Islands, South America? All these states could fall to the Russians because they have a constitution that they actually follow. They don't spy on people and listen in on their telephone calls without a warrant. Vladimir Putin made a worldwide announcement about that when Snowden went there to seek refuge. He said, no civilized country in the world, including Russia, allows the authorities to listen in on your telephone calls or telephone conversations or tap your cell phone or tap into your computer without a warrant. And not here in Russia either. But in the United States, it's like standard procedure. And not only that, but they put fluoride in the water, which is a toxin. They're poisoning us. And they're letting Fukushima poison us without telling you. You'd think they'd at least tell you, duck, duck, duck. I have a feeling that if a nuclear war were coming and they knew the missile was on its way, they wouldn't tell you. They wouldn't tell you. They wouldn't even tell you to duck. You know, I think when I was a kid, we used to have to duck all the time because they used to have these drills when I was in kindergarten. We had a big siren that would go off in the middle of the town. I lived in a little town. And the siren would go off. Whee! I mean, it was loud as hell. And if anybody's house caught on fire, the siren would go off, and it would alert all the volunteer firemen who worked without pay. They would drop what they were doing, and all the firemen would run to the firehouse, jump on board that fire truck, and they'd put the fire out for free. They wouldn't get anything for it. They didn't draw any pension. They didn't get any salary. Taxes were low. Now the taxes, I think my parents have to pay $50 a day for taxes on their house. $50 a day just to live in a paid-off house. I mean, it's a joke. I should have become a second-grade teacher. I'd have made more money. I'd have had a pension. But instead, no, I wanted to become a big-shot insurance guy and a big stock real estate investor. Talk about investing. Let me tell you what bad things can happen to you. You may wonder why I cry poor mouth. Well, I did sell my insurance agency for a pretty good chunk of change. And it only took a matter of days to sell. I didn't think anybody would want to buy it, but when I put it up for sale, before I even advertised it, I just told a couple of my friends who were in the business, and somebody else in the business bought me out, just like that. So I took the money and I put it in the stock market. This was in August of 1987. In October of 1987, there was a stock market crash. October the 19th, 1987, a day that will live in infamy. Well, I was trading stocks. I had purchased a special computer that was tied directly into the stock exchange, and I paid a subscription fee that was about $60 a month. I even had a handheld thing called a Quote-Trek. Ask your stockbroker what a Quote-Trek is. He'll tell you. Back in the 80s, if you had a Quote-Trek, you were the man. I had one of these things, and it would give you real-time quotes on what the stock market was doing. And not delayed quotes. It would give you actual real-time quotes with the amount of blocks of shares being sold, how many shares, and the ticker symbol going by. And you could call your stockbroker on your Motorola bag cell phone, which only cost about $1,200 a month. Had a big battery, about this big in it, real heavy. It was like a gigantic handbag. Or you could stay home and you could have the Quotrek hooked up to your computer and then unplug it. You could go to Bennigan's to eat lunch or something and watch your stocks in your handheld device until you got back home. But all day you could day trade with this thing. And then you just call, instead of you putting the trade in, you call your broker, he'd put the trade in. Because at that point they didn't have the direct connect to the house to your computer. You could look at the data, but you couldn't do anything about it. You had to call your broker. So you call your broker real fast and you'd say buy or sell. Well, right before October the 19th, 1987 hit, I had a bad gut feeling that the market was going to drop big time. So the week before, October the 19th, 1987, I believe was a Monday. So it was the Thursday, the end of the day on the Thursday before that Monday, I sold out and I went back to cash, 100% cash. And I'm always margin my stock when I bought too, so I had double leverage. So you know, if you put up $1, they lend you $1, so you buy $2 worth of stock with one of your dollars up and $1 from the bank at risk, but you were responsible to pay it back. So it doubled your upside potential, but it doubled your downside risk. Well, I was right. The stock market was going to come down, and it fell on Friday. And at the end of Friday, I thought maybe I should buy in now because it fell quite a bit Friday. Then the weekend came, and I decided at the last minute to stay. I was going to buy right before it closed, and I thought, no, I'm going to sit out and see what happens. Something bad might happen on Monday. I want to see if this thing stabilized or if it's going to drop some more. Well, it was a good thing I waited because then Monday hit, and man, that was when it went down. Monday, that was the 19th. And it went way down. What today would be like an 8,000 point drop. Can you imagine like an 8,000 point drop? Well, now they would just hit the internet kill switch and they would stop it because it's not allowed to move more than 2 or 3%. Once it hits 3%, I think they stop it so everybody can take a breather so it won't just crash all the way. Give time for everybody to say, hey, the market's down 3%. Give the buyers a chance to realize that they have a buying opportunity because they might be at work and they might not know it dropped so much. They give the brokers time to call and say, hey, the market's down 3,000 points, why don't you buy in? Well, back in those days, they let the damn thing go. I mean, if it was going to drop, they let it drop. And it did. It went on. And I remember it going down and down, and I was so excited that I had made the right decision to stay in cash that I actually went down to the stock exchange, and I was actually there on the floor that day watching it. And it was crazy, but I was happy inside as it went down because I knew that the next day I was going to buy back twice as many shares for the same price. I was looking at it that way. I knew that the next day I was going to be twice as many shares for the same price. So I called my broker and I went out to dinner with him that night. And I said, look, tomorrow at the open, put a market order in and buy this. I picked 4 stocks in various sectors. I think one was Alcan Aluminum, Mobil Oil, Chrysler, and I think Occidental Petroleum. Or was it, might have been a financial stock. I don't know. But I picked four major blue chip stocks. And sure enough, I put the order in, and I put it in the night before. Now at the open, the market shot up on Tuesday morning. So I'm looking at my Quotrek and I'm thinking, holy mackerel, I doubled my money. Because I could tell by my Quotrek that my money, it only took about 30 seconds to buy or sell a stock, but you had to call your broker. But once you had him on the phone in 30 seconds, you'd own or you could sell the stock. And then it cost you $60 per stock going each way. It wasn't like a $1 a trade like it is now, or $5 each way. it was $60 each way for each stock. So you were paying a lot of money to move your money back and forth, but you had a broker to talk to. And I was dealing with a major firm in Cherry Hill. And so I called at about 11:30 or noon or something, and I said, okay, sell, because the market looked like it had topped out. It was just going like this, and I thought it might drop again. And I had already doubled my money because I was margined. And I called him, and he said, okay, boom, Ben, you doubled your money. So right now I'm going to be a millionaire. Okay, so I hung up the phone. I was so happy. I remember I was dancing around. I had the thing set up in my bedroom. I was dancing around my bedroom. But guess what? I got a phone call back, and the phone call was something like this. Ben, your order to buy didn't go through until you told me to sell. And so, and I had put a sell order in, and so I had bought stock at the worst possible time that I knew was the worst possible time, but I put the order in the night before, but it wasn't executed until the worst possible time. So I had made all the right calls, but the guys on Wall Street didn't exercise and they said because the computer was running slow. And by the way, you can't sue us because you signed an arbitration agreement when you signed up for the account. And there was nothing I could do. And then my sell order that I put in went through when the market went the other way, and it doubled. I ended up, by the end of the day, with the 2 trades, I lost everything. All the money I had saved up over almost 2 decades of work, plus the value of the business, gone in one day. And I had made the right decision. So if my orders had been executed properly, I'd have doubled my money. Instead, I lost everything because I was margined. And there was nothing I could do. I complained, and there were there were 337 people, I think, at that one firm, at that one branch of the one firm, that were in the same boat that I was in. Now that we know what we know, that these banksters do bad things, because it was unthinkable back then to think that they might have maybe used my cash to buy stock in their own name when everybody knew the stock market was going to go up. And they might not have had any money, so maybe they used Ben's money to buy, and they shuffled the money around, and they used my money to buy, and then the slowness of the computers with them shifting the paperwork around to make it look like you lost when really it was you gained. But you know what I'm saying? They were using my money, and they never executed my transaction because my money was in use on their behalf instead of on my behalf. And then when they sold it back to me. And then when I bought back in, it went back the other way. So you see, it was working backwards. And there was nothing I could do about it. I was broke, and I had sold my business, so I didn't have a job, and I didn't have any money. And I made the right decision. I should have been a millionaire that day. Instead, I was a zero. That's one of the reasons my mom yells at me today. And I tell her, Ma, it's not my fault. She said, oh, you had it all, you had it all. Yeah, I did. That wasn't the only bad thing that happened to me in my life. I'm just telling you, that's one thing. And that could happen to anybody today. I mean, look what happened to that guy in New Jersey, Corzine. He just pretty much stole everybody's money. I mean, Gerald Celente lost his gold. He had gold futures. I think he ended up getting a small settlement. Gerald Celente likes buying gold. Anytime it dips down, he buys a little bit. A lot of those internet guys buy gold. They like gold. Like, who's the other guy? Peter Schiff. I think he pushes gold all the time. I'd probably buy some too, but I don't have any money, so I can't. I have to put my money into running for office so I can fix everything. You see, I'm going to investigate these MFers to see what they're up to. And these uncovered derivative trading, hey, if you don't have the asset, you're not going to be allowed to sell a derivative based on the asset, the underlying asset. If you don't own the asset, you can't sell a derivative the derivative is based on. And no more of this gigantic high leverage. That's what led to the crash of 1929. And that's what led to the Glass-Steagall Act. Because after 1929, if you know your history, there was a big investigation. How could this happen? What happened? Why did we have a Great Depression in 1929 when the banks crashed? It was because the banks were lending a lot of money and they were doing investing instead of lending on solid assets, like making a mortgage on a solid house, an asset like a house. They were lending money to people in the stock market at high leverage values. So they were derivatives trading, same thing as they're doing today. So they made the Glass-Steagall Act that said an insurance company is the only thing that can bear a risk, because they're an insurance company and they have underwriters and they're designed to do that, and they're not guaranteeing anybody anything other than what the policy says. But a bank, on the other hand, has got to keep the deposits on deposit, and they have to have enough to pay in case there's a run on the bank, and then they have to have assets, they have to lend the money out. I don't have to, or not. If they don't want to return any interest, I suppose they could just hold the money in the vault and not give anybody anything interest-wise. But they're supposed to not be able to invest in a risk. A bank is not supposed to take a risk. A loan is not supposed to be a risk. It's supposed to be backed by collateral. If you have a secured loan, the loan is secured by an asset, and you never lend more than that asset's worth at worst possible value. So in other words, even if the asset values crash, the bank is not supposed to be loaning out more than that asset would be worth at a future date in a down economy for that particular type of asset. And that's what the Glass-Steagall Act was all about. It was to make sure that the banks didn't pretend or behave like an insurance company like they do now with derivatives. Plus it's worse because a bank, they're taking that money off a printing press and then they're gambling with it. And if they lose, they're going to come back and cry poor mouth to the government and say, we lost, we pretended we were an insurance company so we could quadrillion our money, and now all of a sudden we lost. And so now all of a sudden we've got a problem where we have to pay this claim. And we don't have the money, so we have to ask for a taxpayer bailout. Excuse me a second. So that's exactly why they put the Glass-Steagall Act in place, because they didn't want the banks investing in the stock market or investing in commodities trading or derivatives or taking people's savings accounts and going insane. I mean, what's to stop the banker from taking your savings account and going down to Las Vegas and putting all your savings account on number one on the roulette table and hoping it hits for 36 to 1 odds or something? So, that's a little far-fetched, but you get the point. The point is that the banks are institutions that are supposed to hold your money in a safe way, and they're supposed to have enough reserves so that they can prevent a run on the bank, and within reason. And that's why we have the Federal Reserve too. Supposedly was set up so that if there were a run on the bank, that they could refund the bank cash until the bank could stop, pay off whoever needed cash, and then they could pay them back later, so they have overnight loans. So the whole thing was set up in a nice balance. And then all of a sudden, the Depression went away, and the 50s were better, and the 60s, the 70s are rolling along, and then come the Clintons, and the congressmen decided that the banking was boring, and they wanted to start gambling again. and with the Fed there to write checks and to lend them all the money they needed at a low interest rate overnight, a lower interest rate than anybody else could get, they could make the economy go faster, is what they said. So they slick talked Bill Clinton, and you would think his wife, being an attorney, would have known better and would have that they would have talked about it. But either way, the Clintons voted to go along with what the Congress wanted, and that was to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act, when they should have been there to say, look, there's a good reason that the Glass-Steagall Act was put in place, and how it didn't take you all that long, just a few decades, to forget all about the Great Depression. So as soon as the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed, the derivatives tradings got going, and didn't take all that long for everybody to get into trouble again. So, and that's what these high-risk mortgages are. Basically, it's just like gambling, and they're packaging these mortgages up, and then they're selling them as if it was a stock. And so the banks are saying, well, we're doing what we're supposed to do. We're lending the money in real estate, but it's really they own a piece of a derivative. And the derivative really is packaged together based on whether it's rated as an A or a B or whatever the credit rating is going to be. But those weren't accurate. But even worse than that, with the fact that when they were making loans to people in the real estate business, they were basing the loans on people's credit, and the appraisals were incorrect. They were fraudulent appraisals. You see, when a bank lends money on a mortgage, they're supposed to have a conservative appraisal, an appraisal so that if something, like I told you before, in the worst case scenario, they have to know that they can sell the house for enough money to get their loan proceeds back. And that's what the Glass-Steagall Act was saying. They were saying you're not supposed to lend more than that, otherwise that would be gambling, and it would be taking the risk. So then they introduced insurance, and the FHA and the VA. Then they had the mortgage protection insurance so that you could put less money down. And so you see they work a way around that. They would say, well, if you borrow more than 80% toward the house, they'll give you an insurance policy to cover the rest. So it seems like no matter what you do, they're going to think of some way around it. And so they invented AIG, and they took a lot of risk, and that was all part of the bailout. That probably would have been better if they didn't bail them out, because everybody could have taken their licks. Instead, you've got these mortgages hanging out there that were taken out for more money than the house was worth in the first place. Maybe at that moment in time, that one moment in time, just like that day in the stock market when I told my stockbroker to buy, and if he'd have bought when that market was all the way down, if he'd have followed my orders, my orders were executed, the market would have gone up like it did. And if he'd have sold exactly when I told him to sell, but I wasn't able to buy or sell. But they didn't tell me that until hours later, otherwise I would have canceled the whole deal. So the risk level increases so much when you start lending out too much money and telling people not to put in a down payment. Now, as soon as they put in a down payment, that mitigates the risk to the bank. See, I think if I were running the show, I would say I wouldn't care so much about people's credit, because what is it that's going to that can change really fast, faster than the price of the house? I mean, if something bad happens and the owner of the house loses his job, his credit's going to go down faster than the value of the house. The house is always going to have a certain inherent value, and in the event of a foreclosure, the bank's going to get their money back, so there isn't going to be any loss there. The fellow might lose his house, therefore his down payment, but the bank's not going to lose, and therefore the taxpayers are never going to have a bailout. So the appraisal's got to be correct, and it cannot be an inflated appraisal. And you shouldn't really worry so much about the guy's credit, the borrower's credit, as you worry about the down payment. The down payment is the most important thing. The down payment and the appraisal. I think people should be able to buy a house regardless of the credit if they have a down payment and they have a reasonable, the appraisal is correct. You put 20% down and you have an accurate appraisal, bank can't lose. Doesn't matter if the guy's credit's 300 or 700 or 800. What difference does it make? I mean, I know that I rented enough properties, hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of leases, and I had to make a decision about whether or not to lease out a home, a single-family home, or an apartment unit to people. I was always more concerned about whether they had a deposit and a job, and whether I thought their job was stable, and did they trash the last unit they were in. I was more worried about their character and whether they were going to trash the place, because I knew I could evict them pretty quick. In Florida, you could evict somebody in a few weeks on a lease. Takes a long time to foreclose on somebody in Florida, but a lease eviction goes pretty fast, especially if you're a broker foreclosing on somebody on a lease. But I was more worried about that than if their credit score was low and they had a reason to explain, oh, I lost my job. Okay, so I was without a job, but a month later I got another job that's similar. I know if he loses his job, he might not be able to pay his rent. But if I have a deposit in the last month's rent, and I know I could evict him if I have to, I'm not at any risk. Now, the other part of the risk would be if he trashes the joint. See, because I want to give him his deposit back. And I know I can get him to leave, because if he doesn't leave, the judge will tell him to leave. So I'm worried about he's going to trash the place, and what are the chances his employment's going to continue? So repealing the Glass-Steagall Act was just a recipe for the banks to do all kinds of bad things, and a recipe for those who have friends, the oligarchs, to call the bank, and then the bank can think of creative ways of lending the oligarchs more money than they already have, so the oligarchs can do even worse things that are put everybody at a greater risk, and the bank too, which then puts the depositors at risk. But we have FDIC insurance. Now the Congress passed derivative insurance, God forbid. So now that the Glass-Steagall Act is repealed, and we know that derivatives are 100-to-1 leverage, they're insured by the FDIC, which is really, they're insured by the taxpayers, for God's sake. That's going to crash and burn. And the bank depositors are insured only by the bail-in documents, which means that the banks are going to just take if they can't pay, they're going to get their FDIC insurance on their derivatives, and they're going to be made whole again in a loss. And the people who have money in the bank, actual deposits, they're going to be given nothing. As a matter of fact, their money will be taken, because they're going to say the bank lost money and you're a shareholder in the bank, not a depositor. That's the way it's rigged up right now. Talk about the politicians being insane. That's why I say our rule again is, this is the end of our show, do not vote for the same people. They're friends, relatives, or business partners. Throw them all out. We need new people. Okay, thanks a lot, folks, for watching the show. Bye-bye.